All right. Also, Grant Skeldon is with us, so if we can welcome Grant as well. Awesome. And we're just excited to have a great ministry conversation with Lecrae. So, Grant, why don't you kick us off, my friend?
So, Lecrae, I know you grew up in Houston, right? And spent some time in Denton, Texas. Graduate of UNT. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit about what was it like growing up in Texas. I don't know when you came to Christ, but maybe a little bit of growing up, your upbringing, and then a little bit of your salvation story, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Oh yeah, a whole lot of Whataburger.
Can you share? What is it? So
what did you eat tonight?
Yeah, you just got in.
I just got in. I live in Atlanta now, so we don't have Whataburger in Atlanta. Shame on the city.
Yeah.
So as soon as we landed, I had to just pull into Whataburger. You know, had to make it happen. So. But yeah, man, you know, Texas is an interesting country. I think I have a humongous family. My grandmother's like the matriarch. She's an evangelist herself. She runs a ministry. She moved to San Diego, and I was born in a single parent household. I mean, I had two parents, not immaculate conception or anything. It was, but my father left when I was young, and so my mom pretty much raised me. And she grew up under some very strict religious rules. No lipstick, no pants. You know, so for her, she just struggled with the behavior modification and not the heart change of faith. And so she raised me to be a very free thinker and not really force me to go to church or anything along those lines. And so it was strange. You know, you're in Texas, you're in the Bible buckle, and you're not participating in church and you're not doing any of those things. And so I was very fortunate to have a friend in high school who had become a Christian and invited me to church and invited me to a few things. And I remember, because I just didn't understand the language. Salvation to me, saved, meant being like my grandmother. And so I knew I didn't like peppermints and listen to 8-tracks. And so I thought saved was being a grandma. And I remember a woman walked up to me and she said, "Sweetheart, are you saved?" And I scratched my head because I didn't know what she meant. I was like, from who? From what am I doing? Somebody chasing me. And so it was all around me, but I was so busy involved in so many other different things that it didn't land for me growing up here.
What do you feel like, what was your heart chasing after, your identity kind of captured in at that time?
I had a serious father wound from my father not being present in my life and not reaching out to me. So my sense of worth and significance was very fractured. And so I was looking for worth. I wanted to matter. I wanted to belong somewhere. I wanted to feel as if I had a family, a tribe, very fractured family, experienced a lot of dysfunctional family stuff. So honestly, when Christians approached me and were my friend and wanted to invite me to stuff, I was taken aback, but I was interested because I wanted that kind of family environment, and ultimately it led me to hearing the gospel and becoming a Christian.
Yeah, Lecrae, when did you realize that God had gifted you with musical ability, rap? How did you get into God really leading you in that lane? Tell us about your story of rap and Christian.
Oh yeah, I mean, I started off, you know, obviously as a non-believer, just rapping about whatever made sense to my mind at the time, and as God began to work on my heart, I wanted to figure out a way to change what I was talking about to reflect more of what I was learning, and then of course becoming a Christian, I was learning so much. You know, I was being discipled by seminary students, and I was trying to figure out how to work these Greek and Hebrew words into my songs, and it's very difficult. It's very difficult. It's a trying task, but I knew there were other people like me out there. I knew there were kids like me who didn't grow up in a traditional church model, but needed somebody to speak their language, what we would say just indigenous to that particular culture. And so I wanted to reach folks like myself. So I started volunteering at a juvenile detention center, and I was rapping for them every weekend and seeing that transformation, which inspired me to say, let's keep doing this. And it just kind of exploded. I literally don't know how I'm here today. It's God, honestly. Yeah.
So who are some of your biggest influences?
Some of my biggest influences, like musically, to be honest, I love authenticity. So I didn't have my dad in the house, so the authentic person who could relate to me as a kid was Tupac, because he talked about fatherlessness and his mother. So I related to him very heavily. When I first transitioned into Christendom, it was Lauryn Hill, because I heard her talk about her faith, but yet it wasn't gospel. So I didn't grow up in church, so I didn't understand the traditional gospel music or the hymns. And then after becoming a Christian for longer, it was two big influences. One was a group called the Cross Movement, which was like a rap group who loved Jesus. And then the other was Kirk Franklin, because I saw somebody like walking in a space that I felt like, oh wow, I can be all of who I am and still love the Lord at the same time. Yeah.
Can you talk about, so of course Cross Movement and a few others had kind of pioneered being a Christian and being in hip hop, but I feel like you did pioneer it to a new level over the last kind of 10 years. And I know, and I've heard different stories of you were everywhere, like especially, I'm assuming there was a season of that you were single as well, so you had maybe a little more flexibility. But there was a lot of pioneering, and I'm sure there was like the good, the bad, the ugly of sometimes there was pushback of doing hip hop as a Christian.
Is everybody's phone doing that?
Yeah. Amber Alert.
Is it Amber Alert?
Yeah.
All right, her name is Nyla Crockett, 8-month-old black female. Check it out. Anybody know Nyla? All right, just want to do our due diligence.
You're making it up, right? Okay.
All right.
But it's like one lady right there. No. Okay, so I'll play aside. Just can you speak into the reality of what was it like to pioneer it when even Christians sometimes gave pushback that, hey, these two can't mix? Because now I think it's a lot more common, and so for any new young leader that's going into hip hop and is a Christian, that's not as hard for people to perceive it, but you kind of had to take a lot of the original hits for that.
Yeah, I think when you mix culture is always is tough. Like when you talk about Christianity and culture, we have this unique relationship with it because we're always trying to figure out where faith and culture collide and how they collide and what is okay and what's not okay. And you see it, in so many different circumstances. I mean, if you go all the way back to where people thought it was sinful to have music in church, they were like, what are we doing? This is a crime to have music in church. And now it's like a crime to not have music on Sunday service. And for me, I just remember a time where people did not know what to do with someone rapping because they associated rap with all this negativity, with gangsterism, with violence and misogyny, and so they couldn't see how it could be profitable or used for the kingdom. And what I would remind people is that, even the scripture says, God created everything. All things belong to him. All things are made for him and through him. And so he can redeem and restore whatever he liked to. Music belongs to him, and it can be used for his namesake and his glory, or it can be used to profane him. But there's nothing intrinsically wrong with rap. It's what's done with it. In the same way with film or with art or with anything, I would tell people, I'd say, if I had a butcher knife and I was holding it like this, you would probably think something negative. You'd be like, oh no, scary black man with a butcher knife, what's about to happen? Right? But then if I said, all right, who's ready to feed the homeless these turkeys? All of a sudden everything changes because there's structure and there's direction, and I think we have to learn as Christians to see what God would do with something and how he could redeem it and be okay with not understanding all the nuances of it. And if I can belabor this point just a little bit longer, because you got me on my soapbox. I went to Paris and I thought it was gonna be this super romantic trip. I took my wife and I was like, we're going to Paris, it's gonna be lovely. And then we got there and I didn't realize the language barrier was gonna be so difficult. And so we couldn't speak the language, and no one wanted. It's like if someone spoke French and came to Whataburger and was speaking French, we'd be like, "Look, buddy, you have to figure this out, okay? I'm not trying to help you." And that's how it was in Paris. They were like, "Listen, this English thing you're doing, like, you got to figure this out. Pull out your phone, figure it out." So it was so tough just to find somewhere to eat and to figure out the menu that I gave up and went to McDonald's. Okay, no shade to McDonald's. I'm just saying, I gave up on all this fine French cuisine and just went to McDonald's. And I think that's what we do so often. We get so frustrated with trying to understand the nuance of things that we just give up and settle for something that's not as complex. And God loves the complex. We are all complex people. He lives in the nuance, and the beauty of complexity is who God is. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And, we're in Texas, so we want to clarify that was Paris, France, and not Paris, Texas.
Paris, France. Yes. Eiffel Tower, Paris. Not cows, Paris.
Yeah, so there's the Eiffel Tower in Paris, Texas, with a cowboy hat on top.
Yeah.
And you have French fries, I'm sure.
Yeah. And oddly, a statue of Jesus with cowboy boots on, believe it or not. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, all right.
I have to go see that.
All right, really a spiritual question, Lecrae, is I know you're a sports fan, NBA. Grant, the basketball is that orange round thing. Grant's not a sports fan at all. So, honest question, hot topic, greatest of all time, MJ or LeBron?
That's the politically correct answer right there.
Yeah,
Kobe Bryant.
The emotional strings there. Emotional strings, yeah.
Kobe Bryant. I mean, that's funny. You know what? I don't know, man. I feel like that's a generational question, because honestly, if you ask my 8-year-old, he's gonna say, Trae Young or Steph Curry. So it's so generational. Luka Doncic. Yeah. So, yeah.
Lecrae, what do you think is the biggest hurdle, the biggest danger spots facing the next generation today? The generation that's coming up, the future of the church. What do you think are some of the biggest hurdles for the next generation?
Yeah, you know what? Every generation is the same issue, just manifested differently. And it's identity, right? It's who are we and where are we finding our identity? Where are we finding our worth? Where are we finding our values from? And I think, you have certain generations who find it in self-righteousness and doing things the right way. You watch I Love Lucy and they're sleeping in 2 separate beds, or maybe that's the first show where they slept in the same, but I don't remember. But there's generations who find their identity and this is the way it must be done. And there's generations who, in this current generation, who sees freedom as where identity comes from. They just want to be free. And the problem is they're making up what freedom looks like, right? They're telling themselves how to find freedom when truthfully, Jesus offers the freedom that they truly desire. They just don't realize that. So they're looking for their identity in not being shackled, not being forced. We have more documentaries than we've ever had. We have more information. I mean, I have an 8-year-old who feels like I can't teach him anything because he can Google it if he really, wants to. Supervised Google, though. Supervised. So what you're dealing with is individuals who say, I'm looking for freedom and I'm looking for my worth in being free to be who I'm supposed to be, to do what I'm supposed to do. And there's so much information out there, and they've been taught and they know now the tricks of the trade, and that they don't want to be manipulated, they don't want to be lied to, they don't want to just do the standard run-of-the-mill thing. And so there has to be an understanding that Jesus is the freedom that you're seeking, that Jesus provides the identity and the worth and the value that you're seeking, and not associating Jesus with rigid rules. God was not telling Adam and Eve not to eat from the tree because he was trying to create rules. He was trying to give them the freedom to trust him, to love him, and to enjoy everything that he had provided for them. And so I think that's what the struggle will continue to be, is us learning, actually, as learning from a younger generation, is learning to learn from them and to learn what they do value and to learn what they do cherish, and to be able to speak into that in a healthy way instead of just crashing down on it and telling them immediately, don't do that, because now we're leading in fear and not leading in love. Yeah.
Do you have any type of, we talked about pioneering. Was there a moment or a story that you could share where you felt like, wow, like things have changed, things have shifted, God has opened the door, like something is different. I'm not trying to open doors anymore. I got so many doors coming at me that I got to decide which one to go through. It's just kind of like, maybe we just noticed, yeah, things have changed. It was a breakthrough moment in your career when it comes to hip hop, just as a leader.
Yeah, I think I can see it now. There was a time when I remember going to an NBA practice and trying to pass out some CDs for free to the players. And they looked at me as if I was, handing out Ebola viruses. It was, like, get this away from me. Christian and rap equals crap. It had nothing to do with it. And during this time period, I remember going into mainstream radio stations, and they say, "Oh, look who's here! Where's your choir robe at, buddy?" And then, just all of these, ridiculous, like presuppositions and assumptions. And I remember it was just so frustrating, and I remember praying at night, just like, God, open the door, like, help. It's so lonely, and no one else is at these stations, and no one else is at these games, and then one day, I don't even, it's because it happens gradually, and that's one thing I always like people to know. God is not transactional; He is relational. You don't just pray and then He's like, here. He's like, I want to walk with you through whatever it is you're dealing with. I don't just want to snap my fingers and change everything, right? Because He's trying to work something out in you. And so in that process, God was teaching me to be patient and working on my prayer life and helping me relationally with other people. And I look up and it's like 2018, 2019, and I'm getting text messages from some of the biggest celebrities asking me how to walk with Jesus. I am at practices with NBA players, and they're asking me, is there a way I can do a devotional before the game for the rest of the team? And it blows my mind, because I just remember a time when it was like, ugh, get this away from me. And it was so discouraging. And I think, that's one of the things that Satan will continue to try to do, is discourage us from the mission that God has put us on. Is discourage us from being the light that we're called to be, and to open up the doors. It's always painful to be a pioneer. It's always painful to be a trailblazer. And I don't look back. I'm sure I won't get credit. I don't need the credit, for any of those things. But I do get to look back and see the work. I do get to see these people's lives transformed and seeing them transform their lives. And I'll never share the people who I've gotten time with in a dark room and prayed with and talked with. And I'll never share any of those particulars. But I'll just say that I've seen God do the work. I've seen the fruit come. So.
Can I ask, so if you were to go back to like year one, and it's like the wrestle, God, where are you at? I know you're in this, but man, it just feels like even your own people aren't maybe receiving me like I wish they would. You get to go back to that Lecrae. If you could like whisper in his ear, put your hand on his shoulder and say, hey, this is just something I want you to cling to, something I want to remind you, what would you say to your old self?
I say, Lecrae, the hardest thing about Christianity is Christians.
Amen.
You just gotta have to get used to that, buddy. We're still human, and that's why God calls us sheep. We're sheep, and sheep are, sheep are not the brightest in the bunch, and so, I'm one of them. So I'm just saying. But yeah, I would encourage, someone in my position or myself to stay in the fight. The Bible uses a lot of agricultural language for a reason. I think we know what Texans may know. There's some farmers out here. But it uses agricultural language for a reason, and it talks about planting and sowing. And I was explaining to my son the other night, I said, buddy, in certain parts of the world, before there were grocery stores, you only get an orange once a year. There's one time a year you can have an orange because it's not growing for the rest of the year, unless you live in like a tropical climate. And it just blew his mind, like, oh, so I have to get it right, otherwise I'm not gonna eat. And I was like, absolutely, you gotta stick with it. You gotta wait for those rains. You gotta dig. You gotta plant. You gotta test the soil. It's difficult, and being a Christian is difficult. It's very agricultural. You're waiting on the rains, and you're praying that God would grow things, and you're looking at the soil. You're seeing the locusts eat up stuff, and you're like, Lord, what is going on? But Joel says God restores the years the locusts have eaten it, so that's what we're trusting.
What a word. Lecrae, to shift gears a little bit, man, we were having a deep conversation back in the green room with Carrie a little bit about this. Just how many of you in ministry, I think this is so relevant to it, how many of you in ministry have at some point in your ministry experienced some form of burnout in your ministry? Raise your hand. Look at that. Lecrae, would you share a little? Yeah. Hey, would you share a little bit about that? How you knew you were in burnout, and then like what God did to kind of bring you out of that season?
Absolutely. I came into the faith very zealous. You come in young. I was 19 years old when I became a Christian. You're young and you're idealistic and you're zealous and you just feel like you have enough energy to set the world on fire for Jesus tomorrow, right? And so you're running with that energy, and people are patting you on your back and they're inviting you places and they're telling you can do this, you got this, and it's kind of like a city who hasn't caught fish in a long time, and then someone comes along and catches a fish, and everyone's like, whoa, you caught a fish, you got to go speak at every conference and talk about how you caught this fish, and you're no longer fishing because you're talking about fishing all the time, right? And so I'm running around doing all this communicating and going places and writing songs and on this TV show and doing this, and then I got 3 kids, and I'm telling people how to be a godly parent, and I can talk about it better than I can live it, and how to be a good husband, and just all these things, and you're trying to fight to focus and live all of this. And somebody invented this lie that they told me that I could balance all of these things. And the truth of it is that that's not true. I don't know where we got that idea. So I was sharing this backstage. There's 3 kinds of boats, right? There's one that's a motorboat, a speedboat. I was a speedboat. I was going as fast as I could, covering a bunch of ground, but eventually a speedboat's gonna run out of gas. And the sad part is when it runs out of gas, it's stuck sitting in the middle of the water. And that's where I was. I was just stuck in the middle of the water. God, where are you? I am stuck. I'm just tired. I don't think it's by chance that God puts the most important relationships in your life, marriage and parenthood, and then makes them extremely hard, right? Like they're difficult and trying, and then you're trying to pile all this other stuff on while doing that. So I was burnt out. I was in the middle of the water. And the temptation then is to turn into a raft. And what a raft does, it just floats. So wherever the waves want to take me. I'll be a nominal Christian. I don't care, just whatever. Sunday service, beer, football, and that's it. That's my life. No way. I know we're a Baptist convention. I wasn't advocating beer. I was just saying that's. Thank you for clarifying that. I don't drink. I'm just telling you, I don't. But your cousin does, and you know it. Stop judging them. Leave them to Jesus. All right. I toyed with the idea of just becoming a raft, just nominal, I can't take it. And God reached in the darkest time and reminded me or showed me that I'm supposed to be a sailboat. And what a sailboat does is a sailboat does sit in the water, but there's work that has to still be done. You got to move that rudder right. You got to raise up the sail. And most importantly, you got to make sure you're turning the sail to catch the wind and go where the Father is leading. When his wind blows, you're catching that wind, and he will carry you where you need to go. It's not about speeding through, floating. Let him carry you where you need to go in his strength. And so that's what ministry really is operating in his strength and not our own. And so last thing I'll say to that is what I learned in that season was devotion is not about how devoted I am to God. It's about recognizing how devoted he is to me. And that's what devotion really is about. So,
can you speak into, you're one of the few leaders that, from almost day one, you've been known for not just you, but you've had a community. You've had guys that you've run with. And I'm sure there's been ups and downs over the last decade, but how much have they meant to you, just the 116 and group, and then as well as others now that you even brought in and are given the platform to? But just maybe even a story of lately, just for y'all to, have you guys ever had a time just like talk and look back and say, yo, look at how far God has brought us and all that God has brought us through? Like, I know y'all just went to Israel pretty recently together, just sharing again about how important is community, what have they meant to you, and then any type of story or just to show why it's worth having a group like that.
Yeah, I mean, we were all just friends, and I think, you know, God is a God of community. You know, He operates Father, Son, Spirit. He calls us to live in community, and you know, all the one another verses are in the scriptures for a reason. And I think for whatever reason, probably because we're so American, we just tend to think so individualistically and not think about operating in community. We need each other. We need to lean on one another. And so I've been grateful to have a community of believers to just lean on heavily in my worst times. There's nothing we can't talk about, nothing we can't, you know, we're fully known. And I think everybody wants to be fully known. End of the day, we all want to be known. We're just afraid that people will leave us if they know who we really are. And once you can get past that and say, listen, at my best, I am a clumsy giraffe on ice skates, okay? Like, and when they know that, they're like, absolutely, and I still love you. Then you can start being real. And that's what I've got with my brothers and my sisters, and that's the relationship that we've built over the years. And as you mentioned, we had the chance to go to Israel together, and it was life-changing. Number one, because you're there with people who you love and cherish deeply, and so there's no presupposed idea, there's no putting on of airs. And so when we're processing and we're learning things and we're being challenged and changed, we have people with us there that we can process this with. And it was something extremely special for us to all be at the Garden Tomb, and you're walking out and you are realizing that if this is where Jesus was buried and laid, He's no longer here. He's walked out of this tomb and He lives, and you're there with your friends, your closest friends, and you all are realizing this together, and you're weeping together, and it's ugly faces everywhere. And it's okay, because we're in a community experiencing this together. And it was transformative, so transforming that when we got back home, some of us, you know, we're saying, I don't want this to end. I want to start something. Let's do this on Friday nights. Let's do this on something, and just keeping that going. And I can't stress to you how important that is, and how honored I am to have people like that. And listen, it wasn't always that way. So if you don't have that now, it can happen. God wants it, so it can happen. Pray for that and search it out.
A real quick off-the-cuff question on this is, you and your, close community have gotten to see, favor of God, success among man, but also success in the church. You got to see a lot. And I'm sure you have a lot of young people that can even idolize the life that you may live. What kind of advice do you give to a young leader that just so passionately, sometimes it may even be more attracted to the lifestyle than it is like the work and the ministry of what you do? Is just, how do you speak to their heart and their mind and their soul? Like maybe even something where you realize, hey, this is good, but it can't even compare to what God can give.
Well, one is my own life and just experience in Burnout. I number one album in the country, Grammy Award winning, New York Times bestseller, and I'm depressed and anxious. And you know, I've got family members getting divorced and people dying. Fame, success, and money does not stop death, right? It doesn't. It does not solve the internal issues of the heart. It's not even a good Band-Aid, right? It just doesn't. It doesn't do anything for that. So one is I'm very vulnerable. I think leaders lead in vulnerability in sharing those stories with them, and then two, I just want them to recognize and realize that I didn't write this out. I don't pat myself on the back and say, look where I'm at, look where I've gotten to. If you can look back on your life and have a roadmap to how you achieved whatever you achieved, then it was you and it wasn't God. And so I'm able to share that with them. And then the last thing I always tell them is that the work that it took to become an authority on something means I had to submit to authority. You have to submit to authority to become an authority. To be an authoritative voice on, cancer research, you have to go to school and submit to other authorities in that field. And so to be able to be an authoritative voice in the lives of, young men and women who are fighting to love Jesus means that they're gonna have to submit to authorities. They're gonna have to say, listen, I need wisdom from you. And what I'll tell them all the time, I'll say, listen, man, 0 to 18, just learn how to eat your vegetables, okay? Brush your teeth. All right, just eat vegetables, brush teeth, and just, all right, you'll be fine. But 18 through all through your 20s, gain wisdom. They're so worried about chasing. Just learn. Just sit under wise people, with silver hair and learn. And then in your 30s, go try out the stuff that you've been learning. And then what was taught to me is in your 40s, apply all these things and teach, and keep on teaching it. So that's what I'm hoping is true.
Amen. Well, the Lecrae vision for Empower is primary evangelism, missional living, outreach. And so one last thing, would you share with us real briefly just how you practically practice personal evangelism off the stage and then give an encouragement? Because our hope is that people would go back into their context and go tell the world about Jesus. Would you share that?
Recently, and I'll try to be as brief as I can, my wife and I, we moved, and we had just bought the house. We were excited, and the real estate agent was excited for us, and the real estate agent went to use the restroom, left the water on, and we all left, didn't know the water was on, flooded the house. Just bought it. My wife and I obviously were disappointed, but man, we had been spending so much time in the Lord's face that we knew that he had a greater plan. We knew that all things work together for the good of those who love him, called according to his purpose. And so that's how we carried ourselves around that real estate agent. It blew the agent's mind. They could not understand what would ground us in this way and how we weren't bent out of shape and wanting to cuss people out and wanting to scream and cry. How is it possible? And the agent felt so bad. And, it was a perfect opportunity. It was a door that was wide open for us to say, oh, Jesus has radically transformed us. We've been through so many terrible things. Let's tell you about some of the terrible things we've experienced and how God has brought us through. Why do we have this kind of trust? Well, let's tell you about how Jesus has transformed our lives. And it so rocked that agent. That agent said, I need what you have. I need whatever this is that you have.
Well, hey, haven't we appreciated Lecrae tonight? How God spoke through him. Hey, we want to invite you in just a moment. Matt Boswell's going to come back out, and then we're going to hear from Carrie Newhoff. And then after that, on the 4th floor, we'll continue on where Lecrae will actually speak for 20 to 25 minutes and do a Q&A on the 4th floor. So we want to encourage you to stay and be a part of that. But Grant, could you pray for us, man? Pray for Lecrae and how the Lord is using him.
God, thank you for Lecrae. Thank you for not only saving him, but using him as a voice, an inspiration, a role model, truly a narrative-changing person in our kingdom. And God, I just pray, would you give him favor like never before? Let this new decade be unbelievable. Like he said, you can't pave any way for himself. It truly is your hand, your heart, all over his story. Move in him, move through him. God, I pray again, let the next couple years be shocking of what you do through his life, in his life, and in the next generation. We need you. None of this is going to happen without you. In Jesus' name, amen.